is In the Loop. I'm Christian Bryant. In case y'all didn't know, we're smack dab in the middle of Scorpio season. So here's what you can expect from us. Passionate friendship, betrayal, and looking good in a leather jacket. In this episode, we look at the future of voting, from debate over voter ID laws to tech that could let you cast your ballot from your phone. Then it's an especially tough time to be a teacher. Many struggles aren't new, but the pandemic did make a lot of problems even worse. We sat down with leadership of a key teachers group to cover some key questions. But first, look, who doesn't love kids? They keep us on our toes and they say the funniest, most random things. And the kids in my life, my two adorable nieces and tiny cousins, are extremely loyal ITL viewers who might be watching right now, so I'll try to act right over the next hour. But for all the parents out there, can we just talk about how expensive the cost of caring for kids can be? The Treasury Department reports on average, childcare costs $10,000 a year per child, which is about 13% of the average family's yearly income. And this is a uniquely American problem. Governments of other wealthy countries contribute about $14,000 a year to every toddler's childcare. The US only gives $500. Recently, President Biden laid out his Build Back Better plan, and part of it aims to ease this financial burden. The plan proposes funding for families earning up to 1.5 times their state median income that will cap their yearly childcare fees at 7% of their annual pay. The plan also includes extending the childcare tax credit and providing free preschool for all 3 and 4-year-olds.
This is a fundamental game changer for families and for our economy, as more parents, especially women, can get back to work and work in the workforce.
Many people are paying more for their childcare than their rent or mortgage, which leads to many families deciding to have one parent stay at home. And this has the greatest impact on mothers, especially single mothers. 20% of kids ages 0 to 5 live with just their mom. Worth noting here, the number of working women in the US has stayed flat since 2000, as the number in other countries continues to rise. When talking about childcare, we can't forget about the workers. While the cost of care is extremely high, the Center for the Study of Childcare Employment reports that the average daycare worker makes $24,000 a year, a little more than double what the cost of care is per child. And that math just ain't mathin'. This also explains why turnover is so high. With many childcare workers living below the poverty line, 26 to 40% leave the workforce each year. Childcare facilities are struggling to retain staff and are having to turn some children away. Families are left with 2 big questions. Can we afford this? And will the care be available? The Build Back Better plan really only tackles half of this problem, and not everyone is on board with the bill, in part because it does require more government spending.
Throughout the last 3 months, I've been straightforward about my concerns that I will not support a reconciliation package that expands social programs and irresponsibly adds to our $29 trillion in national debt that no one seems to really care about or even talk about. Nor will I support a package that risks hurting American families suffering from historic inflation.
Here's another tidbit we want to mention. The US birth rate was falling before the pandemic, and it has continued to drop since then. One poll shows that 3 in 5 childless millennials say they don't want kids because it costs too much. Statistics like that make it pretty clear that the costs of childcare and any progress in bringing down those costs will definitely have an impact on the future of family planning across the country. We've heard from politicians on the issue, but we want to hear from parents who've been feeling the pinch of rising childcare costs before and during the pandemic. Like countless other parents across the nation, FRIZZELL CHAMBO from Michigan chose to stay home and watch her kids as childcare costs continue to rise. Listen to a bit of her story.
Pre-pandemic, I was working in a dental office. My husband is a sheet metal apprentice, and we had an in-home childcare facility where a family friend was working. And so she was taken care of. We had 1 little boy at the time. We have 2 now. But during the pandemic, when everything shut down in Michigan, they lost all their clientele. So it closed down. So unfortunately, when dental offices were able to reopen, I had not found replaceable childcare to be able to return to work. I basically would be making money to pay childcare and not bringing anything into the home, even with after school care. And if I was to go back to work and have the little one in full day care, and then just the before or after school for my 4-year-old, it would be about $600 a week. So definitely having some form of assistance would allow us to sit down and say, okay, what's the difference, or what more do we need? And could I make that easier?
And in New Jersey, single mom Latasha Kendrick sometimes has to take breaks from working because childcare costs have become too expensive. And during these times, there's no income coming into her home.
The finance of it is like really hard. Making minimum wage at a job, or not even being able to go to the job because you can't get childcare. It's been rough. I worked for 4 years, then turned around to not working for a year and a half, then going back to work, but not able to find childcare. It's at least like $135 per child or more, just for before care and after care. For the single families that are struggling, like I said, it's not just females, it's males too. And I feel like we as parents don't get enough support even when we're trying.
Meanwhile, one mom in Nebraska opened up her own childcare facility to take care of her kids and others when she realized childcare was one of her biggest bills.
I started my work as a CNA in the Hillcrest nursing home here in McCook. And, after I would see my paychecks, like most of them would be going to just daycare and my rent. So I had, no money to live on as a single mom. So I was like, you know what, I'm just going to open up my own daycare. Not only is it just the comforting knowing my kids are right here, but it's like right now where we live in McCook, there's not very many open spots because, people have to work right now. And so like trying to find childcare in a small community it's super difficult. I don't think people realize the sacrifices we make. Like we're here from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. When our doors closed, or when people's doors closed for COVID, we were still here for everybody. We still took kids so those essential workers could work.
We wanted to thank Kara, Latasha, and Chelsea for lending their voices to give us some of the on-the-ground examples of the childcare challenges facing parents right now. Okay, we're gonna take a quick break, and feel free to do the same, but not for too long. When you're back, we're plugging into our social feeds to see what's trending online. See you in a few. Welcome back, folks. Most days are about balance. Take today, for example. Ageless and non-problematic actor Paul Rudd was named People's Sexiest Man Alive for 2021. Cool, right? But before you can get too excited, the Department of Labor throws cold water on you and puts some bleak numbers to the real-world price hikes we've all been feeling. So here's what's trending online, folks. The Department of Labor released a report finding that consumer inflation, that's prices for goods you'd buy like fuel and food, went up at its highest rate in more than 3 decades. The price of consumer goods went up 6.2% in October compared to a year ago. That's due to factors including rising fuel prices, supply chain shortages, and an increase in demand as COVID restrictions loosen up. Overall inflation is at 0.9%, which is higher than was expected. Thanks, pandemic. President Biden released a statement Wednesday acknowledging that consumers have been hit hard and said addressing rising inflation was a top priority. Now, workers are earning higher wages, but inflation is hitting people hard, in part because prices are rising faster than those raises. Speaking of raises, pushing up those wages has become especially key for businesses looking to attract workers during a time of serious labor shortages. This week, Macy's became the latest company to do that, announcing it will implement a $15 minimum wage for all workers, more than 100,000 employees, by next May. The retail giant will also add an education benefit that covers 100% of tuition, books, and fees for employees who want to complete high school or college degrees. The move follows several other companies who have rolled out similar wage increases and education benefits, including Target, Walmart, and Amazon. By the time your head hits your pillow tonight, roughly 1 million kids will have gotten the first dose of a COVID-19 vaccine. That's according to the White House. This marks a pretty major milestone for vaccinating kids who, until late last week, could not get a COVID-19 shot. The Pfizer vaccine was authorized for children 5 to 11 years old last week, but since this shot is a smaller dosage than the adults' vaccine, it's taken some time to get those shipped out and made widely available. Initially, COVID-19 didn't seem to affect kids as badly as older adults, but a few months ago, we started to see an increase in COVID cases among children, driven mainly by the Delta variant. Now, as the youngins line up for their shot, we have a new wave of incentives to get them vaccinated. Of course, this target audience is a little different, so no shots for shots at bars or anything like that. Instead, school districts are offering things like gift cards, tickets to amusement parks, and raffle entries for scholarships. The next age group we could see get approved would be 6 months to 4 years, and I'm pumped to see what their incentives are going to look like. Trials are underway, but the approval isn't expected to come until early next year. Ready for another round? Squid Game director, writer, and creator Hwang Dong-hyuk told the Associated Press that a second season of the hit Netflix show is in the works, saying, "There's been so much pressure, I almost feel like you leave us no choice," which is a funny way to share your excitement about season 2. Even though most TV shows out of South Korea run only one season, they had to run this one back. Netflix said Squid Game was the biggest release ever with 111 million fans. Well, it seems like this thing was a hit overnight. The script for this show languished for about a decade since Hwang couldn't get any takers. What's even wilder is that casting finished in June of 2020, which means they filmed this show during the pandemic. Now, we don't know anything about a second season story or a release date, and for fear of spoiling the show for anybody who's been under a rock, I'm not going to get into who we're excited to see in season 2, but I will say that if they make these fools play the marbles game again, I'm done. All right, now that you're all caught up on what's trending, there's no need for you to scroll through your phone, right? If only it was that easy to pull ourselves away. Funny enough, we've got a story coming up that's about phones and how they could be used for voting in a future election. I mean, we do everything else with them, so why not digitally cast a ballot? We'll see you after the break. Welcome back, folks. What would you say if you could vote from your phone? You'd have to give up free donuts and coffee at the church where you usually cast your ballot, but just think, no more waiting in long lines at the polls. Well, a Phoenix suburb tested it out in a mock election to see if voters like casting their ballot on the app, and more importantly, if they trusted it. National correspondent Chris Stewart explains how this process could be a faster and more efficient way to get election results.
There are few objects that we've instilled more trust in than this. It holds our money, our tickets, and helps us consume news stories just like this one. But can our faith in our devices run deep enough to entrust them with a role in a system where, for many, faith has been tested?
2018, one party was frustrated. In 2020, another party was frustrated. And so you have this sort of underlying distrust of what is supposed to be the hallmark of a constitutional republic, which is what we live in.
It's one of the questions that Chandler, Arizona Vice Mayor Mark Stewart says his community is looking to answer.
You should have instant results within 24 hours of an election.
This month, the Phoenix suburb is holding a mock bond election where people can cast ballots through a mobile voting app called Votes.
And they're also going to say, do you like this style of voting? Do you trust it?
Those living in Chandler will be able to download the app. They then take a picture of their government ID and record a selfie video, which Votes uses to verify their identity. They then vote right on their phones.
I'm expecting that we'll know our results immediately. As soon as the light is switched off, we'll go and we'll look at the ledger and we'll know what all the data is immediately. That doesn't exist today with our style of voting.
Votes says it's been used in 85 elections since 2017, both here in the United States and in other countries. In 2020, a Utah county ran a pilot program letting those overseas or disabled vote with the app. But it has its critics. Last year, an MIT study said its researchers found potential weaknesses in Votes' security. Votes said the report is flawed and said researchers used an outdated version of the app. They say there has never been a successful hack of their system, even though people have tried.
Almost each one of our elections over the last few years, we see some or the other kind of, attacks. And so far, no one has managed to kind of break into the system.
Vote's co-founder Nimit Sawhney says the app runs on blockchain technology. When a vote is entered into the chain, it cannot be changed. The information is also not held in one location, like just a county clerk's office, but in countless locations across the internet. Experts say that makes it nearly impossible to hack. Other companies are creating their own mobile voting systems using blockchain technology as well.
Chandler's going to use this pilot program with votes, and we're going to try to break that system and prove it wrong. If we can't prove it wrong, well, then we might have something. But again, it's not 2 years from now, it's not 4, it's probably 8, 10, 12 years from now.
While Vice Mayor Stewart says the purpose of their pilot is to see if an app and the technology behind it can be a practical option in the future, it's also about whether it can help a system at the core of our country not become contentious. In Chandler, Arizona, I'm Chris Stewart reporting.
Much appreciated, Chris, for that story. When you think of showing proof of ID, you might think about whipping out your driver's license or maybe a passport, but not everyone has those. And when you go to polls, a lot of states specifically require a photo ID. Even the voting app we just mentioned requires it. Our friends at the Washington Post dive deep into the debate between voting rights advocates who believe these laws hinder people from voting and the other side of folks who believe photo IDs help prevent fraud.
Voter identification laws have been controversial since Indiana became the first state to enact a strict photo ID law in 2006.
The U.S. Supreme Court upholding Indiana's strict law requiring voters to show a picture ID before they can cast their ballots.
Voting rights advocates typically oppose these types of requirements, arguing that they create unnecessary barriers to voting, especially for lower-income voters and people of color.
It can be very difficult for some individuals to get the kind of qualifying ID that a state requires in order to cast a ballot. Millions of Americans lack a form of photo ID, a government-issued form of photo ID.
Some Democrats, like Joe Manchin, have advocated for some form of voter identification, like a utility bill, but not necessarily a government-issued photo ID like a driver's license.
And I've been working across the aisle with all the Republicans trying to get people to understand that that's the bedrock of our democracy.
It may seem like a surprising concession on voter ID for a Democrat, but there's nuance in this discussion, and some Democratic figures are speaking up.
I support voter identification. I reject restrictive voter identification designed to keep people out of the process.
And I got to have some kind of government-sponsored ID, and you make me pay for it, that's a problem. And we've always been against that. We have never been against IDing yourself when you go vote.
Even Obama has signaled his support.
I think it's a common misperception that there's always been wholesale opposition to any and all kinds of voter identification or some sort of identification requirement.
Essentially, with a host of other voting rights issues on the table, Democrats are willing to concede on the area of identification so long as what counts as identification is expanded.
What should raise some questions for Americans across the country is, why would anyone want to make it more difficult to vote?
Voter ID protections are supported by majorities of white Americans, black Americans, and Hispanic Americans, but President Biden calls these things, quote, a 21st century Jim Crow assault.
Republicans generally opt for more stringent forms of ID, like a legal driver's license, to meet this burden of proof.
Senate Republicans have signed their names in the ledger of history, alongside Donald Trump, the big lie, and voter suppression.
Still, not all Democrats agree this is the right compromise. Within the Biden administration, Vice President Kamala Harris has been tasked with protecting voting rights.
Of course, people have to prove who they are, but not in a way that makes it almost impossible for them to prove who they are.
All of this debate surrounding voter IDs was reignited again following the 2020 election. And Republicans say these restrictive laws would prevent voter fraud, although there's little evidence that voter IDs are helpful in this way.
There is no widespread problem of this kind of voter impersonation fraud.
There's now some form of photo ID requirement in at least 18 states, and the types of accepted IDs vary. To figure out if you need an ID before you vote, absentee or in person, which ones work, and how to obtain one, check your state's election website. All in all, the fight over voting rights is drawn along party lines because it ultimately affects who can most easily cast their ballot and determine the next round of party gains and losses.
Many thanks to the Washington Post for that story. Let's keep with this voting theme a little longer, shall we? During the most recent races, we saw a lot of diversity among the winners. Boston's newly elected mayor, Michelle Wu, is the city's first woman and person of color to hold that seat, and Winsome Sears became the first Black woman to be voted Virginia's lieutenant governor. So what does it mean to have more women of color in leadership positions within state governments? National correspondent Jesse Cohen explores how these local victories can impact national politics.
History has been made in Boston. The city elected its first woman and Asian American as mayor.
Who would have imagined that 100 years ago when we were just fighting for the right to vote?
Vedna Haywood with the League of Women Voters says Mayor-elect Michelle Wu is a prime example of the American dream.
There is this possibility here that exists here.
Other candidates of color made history across the country in 2021 elections, including Pittsburgh and Kansas City, which elected their first Black mayor. Cincinnati elected its first Asian American mayor. Virginia has its first Black woman as lieutenant governor. And in Dearborn, Michigan, they elected their first Arab American Muslim mayor.
Globally, not even just in this country, we're sort of in an age, at a point in history, where we're seeing a lot of changes in the kinds of people who rise to political power.
Those changes also affect which issues receive attention.
It allows so many people who traditionally feel like debates don't revolve around their issues or don't feel like the public conversation in a mayoral race is about the issues that matter to them, because there were people who were representative of the community. Those conversations were interjected into the race.
Anthony Davis Jr. is the organizing director for Michelle Wu's campaign. He points out those conversations will continue into her administration.
She's in a very unique position to continue the engagement, to your point.
These firsts are also about embracing differences within leadership.
And now it looks like we might be leading the nation in terms of the kind of pipeline we're creating for leadership.
LYDIA Edwards is a city councilor in Boston. She's also running for state senate.
And I would be, yes, the third Black woman in the state's history to ever serve in the state senate. And if I were to win now, I'd be the only Black person we have in the state senate.
She knows firsthand the benefit of diversity in politics.
I'm a bridge builder. I'm able to run as myself, proudly as a woman of color, as a Black woman, but also being able to connect with everybody.
In her words, to represent and reflect the communities she's fighting for.
That they come from them, that they understand the struggles that they're going through. And so you can only have that if you have diversity.
Elections of people like City Councilor Edwards and Mayor-elect Wu also have a direct impact on a national scale.
It's about the pipelines you create. Today's city councilor could be tomorrow's state senator. That's what we're hoping for.
Across the country now, you're beginning to see the shifts in terms of the school board and the schools and what it is, parents want for their children. You're beginning to see laws that are reflecting some of those voices that are being heard above others.
People are paying attention to local politics in some senses through the lens of national issues.
David Hopkins is an associate professor of political science at Boston College.
One thing that we political scientists know about increased diversity is it tends to stimulate additional representation from groups that historically may not have been as engaged in politics.
He says this very moment could be the momentum that takes these firsts and turns them into the norm.
We're observing in real time the way that the country kind of processes this change and reacts to this change. And that in and of itself has a lot of important consequences.
That's how you impact national politics, right? Is that you are pulling from the communities that are getting into spaces and being in positions that traditionally they've not held.
In Boston, I'm Jesse Cohen reporting.
Much appreciated, Jesse. Do you remember your favorite teacher growing up? I remember mine, Miss Hazel McNeil at Claxton Elementary, a saint who really didn't put up with my mess. You hear me? When we're back, we're talking about teacher shortages and what teachers feel are their biggest gripes.
What if the news was different and covered more than one side of the story?
Justice wasn't served.
So you can make up your own mind.
I love this so much.
Introducing the new point of view, yours. Newsy. Watch free 24-hour news.
Welcome back, folks. Teachers have always had it hard. Long hours, low pay, and a lot of very sensitive hands-on work with kids. And kids like me, which is why we've seen teacher shortages for the last several years, going back even before the pandemic. And now navigating COVID-era challenges like remote learning and mask mandates, or a lack thereof, has made an already tough job even tougher. It has teachers leaving their jobs in record numbers. And it's not just teachers. Schools are dealing with shortages in everything from classroom help like para-educators and substitute teachers to support staff like bus drivers and janitors. It's years of conditions like this that have led teachers to quit or even strike. In 2018, teachers in West Virginia, Kentucky, Oklahoma, and Arizona, with the American Federation of Teachers and National Education Association unions, all protested, walked out, or went on strike. Newsy covered those extensively, and with a similar current of frustration from educators putting teacher labor issues back in the news, we'll be re-showing our documentary Walkout, the School Funding Rebellion, this Sunday, November 14th at 9 p.m. Eastern. Here's a quick excerpt of what you'll see.
A lot of teachers will pick up a second job, whether they're working at Walmart or they're waiting tables at night.
I bartended, I waited tables, I've umpired, I've refereed.
I work a number of jobs. I teach online classes.
In the mornings between 4 and 6 a.m. I teach online to Chinese children. I teach them English.
I'm also an Uber driver.
I've used my past experience of being an athlete to help make more money by being a volleyball coach and a soccer coach.
Currently moving back in with my parents to save on rent money.
I would install cable and internet, climb telephone poles in the rain sometimes, do whatever it took to make ends meet.
I'm also a coach of the academic bowl team, and I am the 11th grade team leader. So those are choices that I've made to make a little bit extra money, but also be as involved in my school as possible.
For now, we're not seeing more strikes yet, but it is a challenging time for teachers as they deal with pandemic-era stresses. As we mentioned earlier, those strikes in 2018 were by members of unions like the American Federation of Teachers. Joining us now is RANDI Weingarten, the president of the American Federation of Teachers, to talk with us a bit about the labor conditions for educators across the country. RANDI, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
We're seeing teachers quit in droves. Based on what you're hearing from members, what's the collective mood or vibe of teachers right now, and how much is that contributing to the teachers leaving this profession?
Well, we always knew that this was going to be the hardest school year ever, because of what just happened in the last 2 school years. And that was without having the national polarizing debate over schooling. 2 years of dislocation and of anxiety and agita has led to real uncertainty and anxiety of parents and teachers and kids. And so there was euphoria that we were able to reopen basically 98% of public schools this year in person. You still have the effects of COVID, including the shortages of teachers and bus drivers and paraprofessionals, particularly with all the layoffs that happened last year.
Is this kind of leading to a mass exodus for a lot of teachers in the profession? Are all these things really kind of contributing to the teacher shortage that we're seeing now?
There was a teacher shortage beforehand, just like so many other things that happened in COVID. It just exacerbated what was going on, because of COVID. So we had a teacher shortage because the pay is not what it should be. The conditions are not what they should be. What I'm seeing is a lot of teachers they're trying the best they can to actually help create a safe and welcoming environment for all kids. And they need to be helped. I'm actually pleading with the public to help us instead of this being a moment where schools are battlegrounds. That kind of stuff is making it harder, not easier, because you're questioning every day as a teacher, not just what you need to do to help create a welcoming and safe environment for kids, but are you going to be in trouble if you actually teach the curriculum that you taught last year or the year before or 2 years ago?
There was a stat that I found a bit earlier from the National Education Association that said teachers make as much as 20% less than other college-educated workers. And since there is a teacher shortage, I mean, how do you see that dynamic influencing teachers' wages?
The study that you just talked about was an EPI study, the Economic Policy Institute, that found in the last few years that similarly skilled people in other professions are making 20% more than teachers. That tells you a lot about, the disrespect of teachers, even though, parents really love their teachers. And we know on a micro level, on a school level, how important teachers are to communities, but they need to be paid a commensurate rate.
Do you feel that issues around reopening schools and changing guidance about how, schools should be run during the pandemic have contributed to teachers quitting?
Yes, of course it has. Look, I want to kind of go back to, this is a once in a century pandemic. You had lots of agita and anxiety about all of this, lots of fear about whether somebody was going to get sick or not, before the vaccines. And so, of course, whether it was for legitimate reasons or not legitimate reasons, all the changing guidance, all the, whether schools are open, whether they're not, whether they're quarantined, whether they're not, how do we keep people safe? Masks, no masks, then back to masks. All of this stuff created tremendous anxiety. And we have to understand that. We got to do this all together. That is foundational for our economy. That's foundational for our spiritual undertaking as Americans. It's foundational for our democracy. And most importantly, it's foundational to make sure that our kids get their mojo back.
Helping our kids get their mojo back sounds like a pretty hip campaign in my opinion. Randi Weingarten, the president of the American Federation of Teachers, thank you so much for joining us on In the Loop.
Thank you.
It's a challenging time for teachers, but also for workers across many industries all over the country. Those same workers are also finding a lot of power in trying to push companies to raise wages and improve benefits. When you're back, we'll tell you more about one sector that's been hit hard as workers seek higher wages. It seems like workers have a lot of power right now. Companies are trying their best to hire staff by raising wages, adding health benefits, childcare, tuition support, etc. Many workers in different fields can be a bit choosier about what kind of place they want to work in, which is great. But on the flip side, there's one sector that's getting hit particularly hard, and that's nonprofit work. Lower salaries mean a lot of nonprofits are struggling to compete and thus struggling to retain staff. National reporter Maya Rodriguez tells us more.
On a sunny fall afternoon,
go ahead, Izzy.
These children just want to have fun outside.
1, 2, 3, go!
This isn't a park, though. It's part of the nonprofit HOEY in Central Maryland.
We work with more young people than any organization in Central Maryland.
John HOEY is CEO. We spoke with him at the HOEY Head Start program, which is funded by the federal government. Lately, hiring staff for this work has become a real challenge.
We've raised our lowest wages at least 15%.
But it hasn't been enough. The Y in Central Maryland serves 300,000 people with a staff of 1,700. Right now, they currently have 300 job openings.
We only have a finite number of dollars, and so we can pay people as much as we're funded.
Normally, there would be 17 children in this classroom as part of the after-school activities here, but because of the nonprofit labor shortage, right now there are 0 kids in here, and that's because they haven't been able to staff it.
It's a significant problem for nonprofits.
David L. Thompson is with the National Council of Nonprofits, which represents a network of 25,000 nonprofits across the country. The services each offers may be unique, but they share the same problem. A survey of their nonprofits found that 80% say salary has become a major issue in hiring, with real consequences.
We hear about the labor shortage for restaurants, and gee, you may have to spend another minute or two in the drive-thru. For nonprofits, literally the case in Montana for a domestic violence shelter, people are having to wait a month because there's not enough staff.
He said trying to fundraise is a short-term solution to a problem needing a longer-term fix, including revisiting contracts some nonprofits may have signed with governments to provide services. And
there's something called the Employee Retention Tax Credit that Congress created during the pandemic that expired and needs to be extended. That's something that Congress can do right now, and it has bipartisan support.
But so far, nonprofits are just having to make do and make cuts because raising wages and passing on the cost to those who need their services simply isn't an option the way it is in the private sector.
You know, I'm not running private fitness clubs. I'm not running corporate after-school programs in preschools. So price is a limiting factor, and at some point you would suspect the labor market will come back into some sense of equilibrium, but right now it's in turmoil.
You ready to count with me? 1, 2, 3, go!
A turmoil they are trying to weather to climb back to a sense of normalcy. In Gwynn Oak, Maryland, I'm Maya Rodriguez.
People don't just have more flexibility in what companies they work for, they have more flexibility in where they do their work. Remote work has given a lot of folks the opportunity to move, especially from more expensive urban areas to more affordable rural ones. But that has had an unintended consequence for the people already living there. Rents have been going up in many rural parts of America, even though incomes haven't gone up in the same way. That's a dangerous combination that can lead to real housing insecurity. National reporter Dan Grossman tells us more about what some communities are doing to keep housing affordable.
There was a quote that was so Gene. It was by E.B. White. It said, "I wake up every day to both change the world and have a good time doing it." Yeah, that was Gene.
On an empty lot in the middle of a town of only a few thousand,
I truly felt that the earth stopped for a while.
MIKI HODGE ponders the meaning of loss.
She was truly a treasure to so many of us. I mean, she really brought a cohesiveness to understanding that it's not just about the individual, it's about the whole.
The whole. It's an idea central to rural towns like Salida, Colorado, where in the event of immeasurable pain, measurable change manages to flourish.
She always told me what she saw on this lot, and it was something that would be a community resource area, something that would take care of families, help incubate new nonprofit ideas.
It is called Jane's Place, a half-acre of affordable housing for workers, foster children, nonprofits, and community resources. The name is to honor the legacy of Jane Whitmer, the town's jubilant pulse who managed to devote 69 years of life to making the lives of those around her better before breast cancer took her life 2 years ago.
She wanted to keep children out of foster care. Bottom line. And how do we do that? We support the family as the whole.
In Chaffee County, where Salida resides, 57% of employers have an employee who does not have a home. It is a startling statistic that sheds light on an affordable housing crisis that affects large cities and small towns just the same.
We are seeing a significant increase month over month on the median close price for sale properties, and we're also seeing our rents just skyrocketing as well.
Becky Gray is the director of the county's housing authority. She says once the pandemic began, people started moving to rural towns like Salida as a way to cut costs and change pace. Last year, the Brookings Institution did a study that analyzed the growth rates of 48 metropolitan counties nationwide. In 2020, 31 of them registered their lowest growth rate in the last decade. It's meant swaths of people have migrated to smaller towns, constricting a system that was already struggling. Data from the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston shows over the course of the last decade, average rent in parts of rural America increased 27%, while the average salary only increased 4%.
We've seen a lot of people moving into the community, buying what has been traditionally rental housing. So that's displaced a lot of other local residents who no longer have those rental options available.
Jane's Place is a way to remedy that, even though its namesake won't be around to see its lasting impact on the town and region she loved.
It really is going to be for everyone, and that's what she wanted.
I'm Dan Grossman.
Much appreciated, Dan. When you're back, we're closing the loop on our top stories for today. But first, if you haven't done so already, feel free to give us a shout on social using the hashtag #NewsyInTheLoop. It's free, y'all, so I expect a deluge of feedback by the time we're done with this show. Welcome back, folks. We know this show is a time investment, and we cover a lot within an hour. If you already forgot what we talked about at the beginning of the show, or if you're just joining us, let me give you a little recap we like to call Closing the Loop. The Treasury Department reports on average, childcare costs $10,000 a year per child, which is about 13% of the average family's yearly income. And this is a uniquely American problem. Governments of other wealthy countries contribute about $14,000 a year to every toddler's childcare. The US only gives $500. Many people are paying more for their childcare than their rent or mortgage, which leads to many families deciding to have one parent stay at home. And this has the greatest impact on mothers, especially single mothers. 20% of kids ages 0 to 5 live with just their mom. Worth noting here, the number of working women in the US has stayed flat since 2000. When talking about childcare, we can't forget about the workers. While the cost of care is extremely high, the Center for the Study of Child Care Employment reports that the average daycare worker makes $24,000 a year, a little more than double what the cost of care is per child. And that math just ain't math. And then ahead of this Sunday's airing of the documentary Walkout on Newsy, we discuss some of the challenges teachers are facing with the return to in-person schooling during a pandemic. Teachers have always had it hard. Long hours, low pay, and a lot of very sensitive hands-on work with kids, and kids like me, which is why we've seen teacher shortages for the last several years, going back even before the pandemic. And now navigating COVID-era challenges like remote learning and mask mandates, or a lack thereof, has made an already tough job even tougher. It has teachers leaving their jobs in record numbers.
And we always knew that this was going to be the hardest school year ever, because of what just happened in the last 2 school years. And that was without having the national polarizing debate over schooling. 2 years of dislocation and of anxiety and agita has led to real uncertainty and anxiety of parents and teachers and kids.
We made it, folks. We reached the end of another jam-packed edition of In the Loop. Thanks for joining us. I'm Christian Bryant. We'll see you here next time, but stick around since we've got more great reporting right here on Newsy.